What is up, you guys? My name is Tatiana. You're watching Tatiana's Tiny Zoo, and today we're going to talk about dubia roaches. Oh god. Do I have to pick a different one? Are you going to fall off my hand? And today we're going to talk about dubia roaches. As you can see, I have a little dubia roach right here on my hand, and today I'm going to be showing you exactly how you can start your own dubia roach colony. These guys are a great nutritional insect to offer your reptiles or even things like backyard chickens. And with a colony of about 25 roaches costing anywhere from $6 to $15, starting your own farm is a really great way to save a lot of money in the long run. And before any non-reptile people freak out in the comments below, these are not the type of roaches that will infest your house that you see down in the south or in more tropical climates. These are not an infesting species. In fact, they need really strict parameters to be able to reproduce properly. Even if you do have escapees, that happens sometimes when you have a big and busy reptile room like I do, I usually find them dead on the floor after a couple days because they just can't survive in our house environment. So there's no threat of these guys multiplying and taking over your house. Just wanted to clear that up before we get started. All right, as you can see, I'm on the floor in front of some more reptiles that I have, and these guys all eat dubia roaches among other feeder insects that I have. And from this spot here, I'm going to be showing you exactly how to start your own dubia roach colony. Today I'm going to be showing you two methods for farming your own dubia roaches. One is kind of the basic method that I see a lot of people in the reptile community use, and then the second method I'm going to be showing you is the one I personally use to farm my dubia roaches. It's a little bit more labor intensive, a little bit more time and investment in the beginning of this setup, but overall I think it saves you time and energy. All right, let's get started on that basic dubia roach setup. The very first thing you'll need is a 10 to 20 gallon container to put all of your dubia roaches in. So this can be any Sterilite bin. You can find them at Target, Home Depot, any home improvement store really. This is the one I got. It's kind of a heavy duty one. Personally, I would recommend the thinner plastic ones. They were just all out of stock when I went, but this one will work just fine to show you exactly what I want to show you. So as you can see, it's not that big. If you want a bigger dubia roach colony, I do recommend getting something bigger, but this is the perfect size to sustain the amount of roaches that I need to feed my animals. When you buy this storage container, you do have to get a lid with it. Make sure you do get the lid, otherwise you're going to have dubia roaches all over your house, and we don't want that. And then as for what type of bin you get, I do recommend something that is a solid color, nothing that's see-through and especially not clear. Dubia roaches and most roach species in particular like the dark. They don't feel very comfortable being exposed to a bunch of sunlight. So if you want them to breed faster, I do recommend getting something that is opaque like this. It doesn't have to be black, but anything that just blocks as much light as possible will make your roaches much more comfortable. Your roaches also need good airflow. So the first thing we need to do with this is make some modifications to the lid. I'm just going to draw an outline here, and now I'm going to use a box cutter or an X-Acto knife, or even if you have a power tool, that might be a little bit easier, and we're going to cut a big hole through the lid. The extra plastic we can toss, and now we need to cover this hole with something, or you'll have a lot of escapees. So I just have some plastic mesh here. You can also use aluminum like window mesh or anything similar. You just want it to be a breathable material, but the holes have to be small enough that baby roaches can't get through. And then I'm going to attach this to the lid with hot glue, Gorilla Glue, anything like that. One tip I have for attaching the mesh to your dubia roach container is to glue it to the outside of the bin, not to the underside. And that's because dubia roaches can actually start to eat away at the glue, and then they can escape afterwards. So if your hides and stuff that you put inside this bin touch the lid and you glue it on the inside, they'll start to eat through the glue, and then they'll be able to escape out of your container. Okay, now that we have the actual container done, let's talk about what goes inside. Dubia roaches like to have lots of places to hide and to climb. So one thing that can go inside your dubia roach colony is something like egg cartons, specifically these cardboard ones. The styrofoam ones might be a little dangerous if the dubia roaches do ingest them. These provide a lot of nooks and crannies for them to hide into and for them to climb all over. So they do really enjoy these. You can get them pretty cheap just buying them wholesale. You could buy a whole bunch of these, or you can get them at your local grocery store when you do buy eggs. That's how I get mine. So I just break a couple of these in half, and then I can use these and put them inside my Dubia Roach Colony. Another thing I see people use a lot is cork bark, and obviously this is a much more natural item to put inside your Dubia Roach Colony. Personally, I don't think it matters which one you choose. You can even put plastic plants and things like that in. As long as the roaches feel secure enough and that they have plenty of places to climb so that they're not sitting on top of each other, they will be successful in reproducing for you. Now, the only other thing you're going to need is some sort of heat source. Dubia roaches like it warmer than the average household temperature. Somewhere between 75 and 85 degrees is what they're comfortable at. So unless you keep your house that warm throughout the year, you're definitely going to need some supplemental heat. And what I do to make it warm enough is I take a normal reptile heat mat and I will attach it to the outside of the bin. These usually run very hot. With reptiles, it's always recommended to use a thermostat or something to control the temperature. Otherwise, they can burn your reptile. And the same with roaches. They can burn your roaches as well. So unless you're using a thermostat inside your Dubia Roach Colony, I recommend attaching this to the outside of the bin, not the inside. The plastic is enough of a barrier to prevent it from getting way too hot, and it seems to permeate enough heat to keep the roaches at a comfortable temperature. And I only add a small heat mat to one side of the Dubia Roach container. That way, if the roaches get too hot or too cold, they can thermoregulate themselves. If you have a huge heat mat that covers the entire length of your enclosure, then they don't really have a way to get away from the heat if they get a little too warm. And that's pretty much it for this method. You can add your roaches to the bin, and they should successfully breed for you and provide food for all of your animals. You can feed them a few times a week with a specific roach diet or with scraps of fruits and vegetables that you have in your house, and you'll have a thriving colony in no time. Now, Dubia roaches, like every other living thing, produce waste, and that waste is called frass. It's a black powder-like substance that collects on the bottom of your bin, and like most living things, they don't want to live in that for very long. Now, once you notice a smell or that waste start to build up on the bottom of your Dubia Roach Colony, it's time to clean it out. One way to do this is to open your lid up and take all of the furnishings and take all of the roaches out. You're going to have to put them into a secondary container to hold them while you clean this bin out. It's a little bit labor intensive. I'm not really about it. It's not my favorite way to get rid of waste. So now that leads us into the second method of starting your Dubia Roach colonies, and that is a self-cleaning Dubia Roach setup that you very rarely have to mess with or clean out. It just does all of the work for you. One option to make this bin self-cleaning is actually to remove the bottom of it and replace it with that plastic mesh that we used for the lid. So you're going to cut the entire bottom of your plastic bin out, and you're going to replace it with the mesh that you used for the lid earlier. And you're going to want to buy a second one so that you can stack them into each other. And all you'll have to do is shake this bin a couple times, and all of that frass will fall through the mesh into the bin below it. And then you don't have to mess around with moving any of your roaches or getting rid of any of the egg cartons. The frass will just fall through, and then you can empty that empty bin and clean it that way. That is not a method that I've tried before. If somebody does do it that way, please leave a comment down below. Let me know how it works for you, because personally, I just don't do that. Now we're going to talk about the method that I use for my Dubia roaches and have been doing it successfully for a number of years. So here's how I personally keep my Dubia roaches. As you can see, there's quite a few things that are different here than in the bin setup I just showed you. The first thing you'll notice is the glass tank that they're in. There isn't a particular reason for this, it's just what I had laying around my house at the time. I keep these guys covered with a towel so they aren't scared by the bright lights of my reptile room. But while I'm showing you this method, I will be transferring my entire Dubia Roach colony into this black bin just to save myself a reptile tank. I want to use that enclosure for something else. The other thing that's different is the substrate I added. And the substrate helps to absorb some of the Dubia Roach's waste. So instead of the frass just sitting at the bottom of that bin and collecting dust, it kind of permeates down into that substrate layer and it becomes more tolerable for the Dubia roaches. The other thing I have in here that's a little bit unique to my keeping style is a cleanup crew. So just like in the bioactive tanks you see behind me, my Dubia roaches actually have their own cleanup crew that helps remove some of their waste and prevents me from cleaning it so often. In this Dubia colony, I've added mealworms and beetles that help clean up the waste of the Dubia roaches. They eat the frass that the dubias produce, and they will take care of any of the dead roaches in here by completely eating them. So let's go ahead and move these guys out of this enclosure so I can show you exactly what I do to set up my Dubia Roach colony. Alright you guys, now that I've shown you my different way of keeping dubia roaches, let's move them over to this new bin. And again, the only reason I'm doing that is because I want this tank back for something else. This bin is about 15 gallons, while this tank is a 20 long, so they're almost the same size. And I think that the size colony that I'm at right now is perfect to feed all of my reptiles. If my collection got any bigger, I definitely think I would need a bigger container to store my dubia roaches in, so you guys have to judge for yourselves how many dubias you're going to go through. Again, I have other feeders at my house as well. If you haven't already, check out my mealworm farming video for another way to save money while keeping exotic animals. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is put the substrate into this black bin. And my substrate mix I have is just eco earth, a little bit of topsoil, some forest floor or reptile mulch would work as well, and some sand and a little bit of charcoal. And I don't know if you guys know this, but baby mealworms and baby dubia roaches will actually eat their own frass. So mixing it up with some substrate and getting it further down into the enclosure is really beneficial for those babies that are trying to hide and have a little snack as well. And that's one of the ways that this tank is bioactive or self-cleaning. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this in the bin. This seems to be a great mix at absorbing a lot of that frass. I have not noticed any sort of smell. And I've had this set up for about 2 years. But if you do notice some sort of smell, that definitely signifies that you need a refresh of your substrate. You might have to scoop some of it out and then put some new substrate back in. And I am going to save some of my substrate to put on top, but that's pretty much that. And now I'm going to go ahead and take some of these hides that I have and put them in as well. And we'll face it this way so that they can get towards the heater if they want. And then I'm also going to go ahead and start moving these over. So if you can see, there's dubia roaches and stuff hiding in here. So I'm going to go ahead and start moving them over by just grabbing my current setup and transferring it all. All right, now that we have all of that, I'm going to pick up this tank and I'm going to dump the substrate in here. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's a lot of dubia roaches inside the substrate buried in here. They really like to dig down into the dirt. So I'm going to go ahead and just dump all of that. But before I do that and kick up a bunch of their frass, I'm actually going to put a mask on. And I do this with my mealworms and my dubia roaches. Dubia roaches in particular, a lot of sources say you can start developing allergies to them from their waste. So I try never to breathe any of that in. Anytime I have to dig around in here and kick up a bunch of that frass, I'm going to be wearing a mask because I already have allergies to like everything. I don't need any more. And mealworm frass in particular usually makes me need my inhaler afterwards. So just as a precaution, I recommend everybody wear a mask when they're handling large amounts of substrate or frass from their dubia roaches. All right, we're going to go ahead and dump them in. All right, now that I've made kind of a bit of a mess in my reptile room, but all of my dubia roaches are in here. I've given them fresh substrate. There's only one thing left to do besides take my mask off, and that is add a cleanup crew. And the things I use for the cleanup crew in here are mealworms and mealworm beetles. And that's because baby mealworms, as well as baby dubia roaches, actually eat the frass of other insects when they're itty bitty, just hatch from their eggs and tiny. So I'm going to just go ahead and dump them. I've got maybe 5 to 10 of the beetles and just a couple mealworms. I know that when I dumped my previous colony, a lot of the mealworms that were in here transferred over. I'm just adding a couple more to supplement the new space. And the mealworms always thrive in this enclosure. They eat the same kind of foods as the dubia roaches. In fact, they do so well that I often have to pick them out and add them to my mealworm colony, or just feed them straight to my animals. But it seems to be working really well for me. And that is actually it for this dubia colony. That's all you have to do. You have your heater, your substrate, they're in a dark space. They should successfully breed for you. And with this type of setup, there's going to be way less cleaning. Again, I've had it for about two and a half years in that glass tank. I've never had to clean it or change the substrate at all. But if you do notice a smell or anything, funky going on, that definitely means it's time to refresh the substrate and remove some of it. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope this video helps save you money in the long run by teaching you how to start your own Dubia roach colony and how to take care of them successfully. If you have any questions or requests for further videos on how I save money with all of my reptiles, please leave a comment down below. And if this video helped you at all, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.